Hello everybody, it's Foofootoo here, and today I'm going to be doing a video all about Incineroar's newly released hidden ability, Intimidate. This has added so much value and potential to this Pokemon, it is a bit crazy. And I'll go into detail about some sets you can use to make the most of this. So without further ado, let's hop straight into it. And first consider it just a bread and butter set that you will be seeing with Incineroar. It's just making the most of the bulk. It means that it can switch into things quite easily, and this can be used both in singles and in doubles. The set that I'm showing here is probably more doubles focused, but you just need to switch out some of the moves to make it singles focused. So really, what is so great about Intimidate? It means that Incineroar can now take a lot more moves. When we initially found this Pokemon, a lot of people were disappointed because it was quite slow and quite bulky. But actually, now, that is so good, because with the Intimidate and those bulk stats, this thing can eat up hits. And a really nice held item for it is the Assault Vest, because the Intimidate reduces the opponent's physical attack stat, and the Assault Vest reduces damage from incoming special attacks. So both your defense and your special defense are shored up so much, this thing can tank so many hits. So let's go into a bit more detail about why Incineroar benefits so much from this and why it is such a good bulky Pokemon. In singles, the main reason is because it can pivot in and be a very nice pivot switch. Especially in the Smogon tier it's in, there are a lot of potent fire types like Delphox and like Typhlosion, and you can even try it in higher tiers and try it against things that usually hit very powerfully, but it can take those hits in higher tiers, get the Intimidate off, and make the opponent a lot less threatening. And then with its moves, it still hits very hard. You can invest in its attack, or if you want to shore up some of its defenses a bit more, that's definitely an option, but its HP, you should always invest EVs in its HP. So the moves here, Knockoff is such a useful move, both in singles and in doubles. Removing your opponent's item is invaluable. In singles, you'll be removing maybe offensive items, leftovers, and it just can be so great. In doubles, you're getting rid of some 50% berries, which is incredibly helpful to take down bulky Pokemon a lot quicker. So that is great. It's also got its stab move, which you might want to use Flare Blitz, you might want to use Overheat. Flare Blitz is great for the power. Overheat is an option because you then don't take a recoil. Remember, we're trying to use this guy to maximize his bulk, and then if you're using a recoil move, that could be a bit detrimental. To mitigate that a bit, rather than the Assault Vest, you could use Fire Z and the Flare Blitz, which means that you get a very powerful fire type Z move, and you don't get any recoil on that Z move, but then you have to rely on Flare Blitz once that Z move is used up. The other moves that you can run, I think U-turn is great both in singles and doubles to get this guy out of there, because he's a pivot switch, he's slow. It means that when you U-turn out, your opponent will probably have already attacked, and whatever you bring in next doesn't have to fear the opponent as much because they'll be at -1 attack and they won't have to take an attack on the turn that they come in. So that is great. It's a very good potent U-turner, and what's really useful is that you then save the Intimidate for later in the battle. You can bring him in later to get the Intimidate off there. The final move, in singles you might want to run another coverage move like Earthquake, but in doubles, Fake Out is what you want to be using. Incineroar with Fake Out and Intimidate is just so useful to help your team out, whether it's a Trick Room team in which Incineroar will be benefiting from the Trick Room because it is quite slow, whether it's a Tailwind team where you can Fake Out, your partner goes for Tailwind and then you've got the speed control there, or whether it's just faking out to help your offensive ally go for an attack safely. Whatever it is, this is so helpful. You intimidate both opponents, get that Fake Out support, you can knock off the opponent, and you can even U-turn to save the Intimidate and Fake Out for later in the battle. As I say, you can swap up the held item. Fire Z is one option, but in doubles, the 50% berries are very, very useful too, and that is probably an option you might want to use there. Other moves that you can put in here, Snarl is a good option because you can reduce the opponent's special attack even further. But this set is very bread and butter. It's not too much more to say there, just that it's very good at tanking hits and being a good utility Pokemon, removing items, faking out, and getting some damage with your fire type move. Really cool, and it's just so good now with the Intimidate. The next sets that I want to consider are setup sets, and there are two different kinds of these. The first one is a Swords Dance set, and the second one we'll look at is a Nasty Plot set. And these benefit a lot from the Intimidate because they just get even more setup opportunity. Now these you probably don't see too commonly at the moment, but now that Intimidate is released, they are definitely more viable because you can come in on more Pokemon to get that setup opportunity. The Swords Dance set is really good. Flare Blitz and Knockoff have generally very good coverage, and then you can go for a number of different things for that last slot. You might want to go for Earthquake, you might want to go for different coverage. I think that Flame Charge is pretty cool because you can get the speed boost as well as the physical attack boost, and this guy becomes very strong and very scary straight away. I've gone with the Fiery MZ here because Flare Blitz does have recoil, so instead of having to take tons and tons of recoil again and again and again, you've got the Fiery MZ to nuke one Pokemon, take it out, and not have to take any recoil, so that's really fun. The other setup set that I had here is a Nasty Plot set. This is cool. Again, you get the Intimidate, meaning that you have more setup opportunities and you have just the same coverage really here. And I've also put Flame Charge on this set because I think a lot of people won't necessarily see that coming. You could have different coverage there, but Incineroar is slightly more limited on the special coverage that it gets. So I think Flame Charge is a good option here, but as I say, you can always change that out for something else. I really like the idea of a setup Incineroar. I think that it can put in a lot of work. Whether this set will be as viable as the bulky pivot attacker, I don't think that it will be because that set just adds so much value and so much roll compression because it does so many things for your team. But this one is really cool as a win condition, definitely more viable in singles, and I really want to see it work. So let me know what you think about these and whether you'd want to consider using them. I think that they look really cool on paper. In practice, they're probably a bit harder to use, but I would love to see them in use. The final set that I'm going to show off today is going to be a substitute set. It's also a kind of a setup set. I guess I could lump it in with the other two, but I do think that it's different, and that's because it's like a bulky substitute set. It's really cool. You wouldn't need, I've got bulk up on this set. You don't necessarily need to run bulk up. You could have substitute 3 attacks and be more offensively based. This one's got a lot of HP and a bit of speed. You could put some, you could make it more like specially defensive with bulk up, but having some attack there I think is quite nice because you'll force switches and be able to get some big hits off. This set I'm using is a bit strange because it doesn't have any fire coverage. That's the one issue I'd say with bulky Incineroar with Intimidate. Its best fire coverage is its Flare Blitz attack, and that causes recoil. For a bulky Pokemon, not ideal, especially if you're going for substitute because you're chipping away your own HP with that. So instead here I've got Drain Punch, or you could run Leech Life, although I think there's a bit more redundancy with coverage there. But these moves allow you to get a bit of recovery with a bulk up set, so that's quite nice. I've also put the leftovers there, really helps out. This thing can set up on a number of different Pokemon that aren't expecting the set. In the example that I use, I've got a defensive, so the Intimidate Incineroar comes in on a Dugtrio, and Dugtrio would normally win that matchup, but obviously with the Intimidate, Dugtrio fears not being able to take out a very bulky Incineroar, so has to switch out because it will get OHKO'd by Incineroar. Incineroar is definitely powerful enough to do that. Moltres comes in thinking that it can take on Incineroar. It's a defensive Moltres with Toxic. It could eat a hit, roost off, and do whatever. But that's not the case here because we've got the substitute. Moltres can't go for the Toxic, and Incineroar is looking like it can set up for days. So it's a really interesting idea of a set. I think that maybe substitute 3 attacks would work a bit better with the leftovers. You're forcing switches, especially if you've got a team with lots of hazards. You can really threaten the team. Knockoff is a great move for this set because you're crippling the opponent's walls and switch-ins to your fire type, which is always great. And I really would like to see this set do work. Instead of bulk up, again, you might want to run a different setup move. Swords Dance could work for this set actually because sub Swords Dance is very scary and can definitely break through some walls. But I just really like the idea of substitute on Incineroar with Intimidate because it gives you so much momentum and so much priority. So definitely one to consider out. I think those are three ways that you can use Incineroar with the new Intimidate ability to its fullest. The first set that I talked about is definitely the set that you'll be seeing most used. The item, as I say, is a bit interchangeable, but basically a 4 attacks set is definitely the one you'll be seeing most. But I think that these more setup sets are much more viable now with Intimidate, so I do hope to see them being used more. I haven't touched on different forms of Incineroar. You could run a choice banded Incineroar, but I feel like Intimidate doesn't add as much to that set because you're forcing switches with that set anyway. The opponent probably should be fearing that set. And also there are potentially Pokemon that are better at a choice banded set. There are other fire types that work better as offensive fire types. Things like Darmanitan, Arcanine, Emboar, they hit a lot harder and can run the choice banded fire type set a lot better. Whereas there aren't really many fire types that can do the same thing as Incineroar with Intimidate. We've got Intimidate fire types in Arcanine, but Arcanine can't set up, so that's why I wanted to demonstrate those sets. And Arcanine also doesn't have the fake out and doesn't have the U-turn and doesn't have knockoff either. So there are a number of things which Incineroar does with the bulky kind of sets. I think Choice Band I've left to the other fire types there. Those are just some thoughts about Intimidate Incineroar. I think it is very powerful. We've already seen in a lot of the regional VGC competitions, Incineroar's almost on 50% of the teams in some of them, which is crazy from not being in very many at all. And Landorus Therian, which was ubiquitous, it was absolutely everywhere, has now got serious competition for the Premier Intimidate user, which is fantastic to see. I love Incineroar. I love a starter Pokemon getting all of this attention and this hype. I think it's great. Definitely try this guy out. Let me know which sets you're enjoying using. But that's going to be all for today. If you like this kind of video, please leave a like. It really helps out the channel. All that's left to be said is I've been foofootoo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.